Zimbabwe is gearing up for its national elections in 2023, and evidence so far suggests that the harmonised polls next year will be highly contested, with a likelihood of hotspots for violence, intimidation and criminal activities from political party supporters. Well, the Election Resource Centre in the country is concerned with violence that's been experienced in recent by-elections. The tensions between political parties is quite tangible. But what of the non-governmental organisations and rights groups in the country? How are they faring under the current political environment? Well, we speak now to Blessing Vava, who's the Director of Crisis in Zimbabwe Coalition, a conglomeration of more than 75 civic society organisations. Thanks very much indeed for joining us. Always good to talk to you. Welcome to the programme.
Thank you, Peter, and thank you for having me.
All right, we're going to talk a little bit about human rights groups, NGOs, civic organisations such as yours just now. But I just want to get a sense from you as an observer, the prevailing political environment in the country, what would you say is playing out at this time?
Well, what I can say that the prevailing environment in Zimbabwe at the moment, on the eve of an election that is coming next year, is very disturbing. I think you have also read or seen the images that are goring images that are coming from Zimbabwe, the violence that is being perpetrated mainly by ZANU-PF supporters, like what we saw in Matobo and in Caesar. It's quite disturbing that we also continuously see the government of Zimbabwe using force on its own citizens. We also see the partisan law enforcement in Zimbabwe, the judicial system also in shambles. I'm sure you are all aware of the incarceration of Honorable Sikala and Honorable Sitole and the Nyatsime team that is still in incarceration and being denied bail. We also see the partisan nature of the media that is continuously spewing hate language against political opponents, which then signals that Zimbabwe, we can safely say Zimbabwe is not ready to conduct a free, credible elections, just basing on the basic benchmarks that have been set out, especially by the various regional and international states that Zimbabwe are part to. Here I'm talking about the African Charter on Democracy, Elections and Governance, and also the SADC principles and guidelines on the conduct of democratic elections, but also our constitution that has been violated left, right and center by the ruling elite.
All right, I want to talk about, just before we sort of talk more about the politics and the elections, the economic climate, the plight of the average Zimbabwean at this time. What are you observing? What are the issues that they're dealing with and lamenting?
Well, I'm sure you are all aware of the neoliberal policies that our government has been embarking on. We have had, the government of Zimbabwe, especially the president of the country, boasting that Zimbabwe is open for business. Zimbabwe is being open for business, but while it's denying its own citizens, a decent lifestyle. The teachers are earning meager allowances. I can safely say that those in the employment sector are struggling to make ends meet, and a majority of Zimbabweans have been reduced to go into the informal sector, of which that informal sector, we've also seen that the government has been clamping down on those who are trying to survive through the informal sector. But also, we can safely say that our economy's failure to perform has been caused by massive corruption in the public sector, mainly caused by the ruling elites. I'm sure you have heard of the laptop scandal in Parliament, in that there is no accountability whatsoever. But what's said is that as this is happening, a majority of Zimbabweans are failing, to get just a decent meal, school fees, tertiary institutions, the fees are beyond the reach of many students. I'm sure you've heard even students clamoring that fees must fall. All that signals an economy that is failing, an economy that is run by people who are running out of ideas. I'm sure all the proposals that the highly rated Mutulungwe has been imposing on our economy have just failed to work.
So what does the re-election of President Mnangagwa as the president of the party, the governing party, and will be standing as president in the next election, what might that mean? We hear from party faithful that he's been doing a good job and that this bodes well for Zimbabwe going forward.
Well, the election of Mnangagwa, I can't say that was an election. ZANU-PF has not had elections at its own congresses. We saw the way that that process was handled, that there is no democracy in the ruling party. But above all, I should say that it has proved that the working out of, Mashonaland central provinces also shows that Mnangagwa is no longer popular in his own political party. We have seen overtures of the various, groups that are all claiming the other one is pastors for ED, Mawindi for ED, so and so for ED, which is actually the first time that we have seen a presidential candidate of the ruling party without the support structures of the party. We all knew that during President Mugabe's reign, it was mainly the war veterans who would come out clear as the foot soldiers. The youth would come out clear as the foot soldiers. But what we have seen now, we have seen a ZANU-PF campaign that is mainly centered around this presidential candidate, but which also shows the deficiencies and the unpopularity of President Mnangagwa within his own political party. But also, I should say that the re-election, or should I say the coming back of Mnangagwa as president of presidential candidate, of ZANU-PF, I think it's a plus for those who are contesting him in the next elections, in that all the indications are now there that he has totally failed, and what just needs to be done is for people that are organized, an opposition that is organized, to be able to remove ZANU-PF from power.
When we started this conversation, you suggested that it seems difficult to see a free and fair plebiscite taking place in the country in 2023. What might be some of the remedies you see as civic organizations in terms of perhaps finding a way to make sure that this election is representative of the wishes of the people?
I think that what needs to be done is number one. I think Zimbabwe, what we've been lacking as a people is dialogue. I'm not talking about the Pollard platform that was created by Mnangagwa. So I see, number one, we need to have local remedies. And local remedy, number one, we need to set up what we can call a genuine multi-stakeholders dialogue platform that should also agree on a reform agenda. On the reform agenda, I'm talking about the reforms in the economy, the reforms also in the politics, and also that setup must include and not limited to the government, the civic society organizations, the churches, the trade unions, the political parties, students, the farmers, and the like, so that we lay a ground for credible elections and ensure that also that those who are running elections should be independent and not act in a partisan manner. We also, in that multi-stakeholders dialogue, it should also be clear that the respect of the rule of law should be abided by the ruling elites, especially by the government of Zimbabwe, but also to call for the full implementation of the constitution. And the second part, I also think that the regional bodies have a role to play. I'm talking in particular about SADC and the African Union that they must also step in and make sure that in the coming elections, at least they deploy monitors or observers that are going to make sure that at least the elections are going to be held in a free and fair manner. And the other point also is for the military to stay out of politics. We have seen previous elections where army generals would have a press conference on the eve of an election to declare that they are not going to salute any winner that has not participated in the liberation struggle, which is totally against the constitution, which is totally against the aspirations of the liberation struggle.
You talk about multi-stakeholder talks coming together. The president will tell you that he's tried to set up these conversations, but not all the opposition figures and bodies want to participate.
I think that if you look at how the pollard has been structured, it has been structured in such a way that only those who participated as presidential candidates, a majority of them failing even to garner 50 votes, and those are the people that have been grouped by Mnangagwa to purport that they are having, a dialogue of some sort, while these two are leaving out critical players in the running of the country. Here I'm talking about the churches, I'm talking about the civic society organizations, but also I think that what the government of Zimbabwe needs to do is also to take a cue from the proposals that have been made by the church in trying to have the Zimbabwe we want, so that we bring everyone on board, and the dialogue should not just be limited to political parties, because political parties, their interest is to contest for political power, only that. So what we need is an all stakeholders dialogue, everyone included, to make sure that we chart a way forward for our country. You know what happened during the liberation struggle. Yes, the comrades were there in the bush, but also everyone had a role to play. And when it came to independence, we made sure that everyone was also involved in building a new Zimbabwe after independence.
All right, perhaps finally, civic organizations such as yours, rights groups, how are they operating in the country? We've seen accusations that some rights groups are being used by foreign powers, being funded by foreign powers to fund regime change.
If there's anyone or if there's any grouping that has received foreign funding more than anyone, it is the government of Zimbabwe. It is also ZANU-PF, which has been getting millions of campaign, material from China and also from Russia. What is said is that the government of Zimbabwe is seeing shadows. Our role as the non-state actors is also to bring the government to account. But what is said is that the government of Zimbabwe is now hiding under the Financial Action Task Force recommendations to introduce the PVO Act. Essentially, the PVO Act is meant to dismantle, it's meant to disrupt the work of the civic society. Our work is very legal. We're legally registered under the confines of the law of Zimbabwe. And the coming in of the PVO Act surely is going to affect the operations of civil society. But our message to the government of Zimbabwe is that we are not going to abide by unjust laws. We are going to resist by any means necessary. If the comrades, if ZAPRA, ZIPRA, and ZANLA were banned during the liberation struggle, they were banned from operating from Zimbabwe. They were labeled terrorist organizations, but still, they managed to cross the border to Mozambique. They managed to cross the border to Tanzania. They managed to cross the border to Zambia. So be it. We're also going to use some of those avenues to make sure that the struggle continues.
Mr. Vava, we'll leave it there for today. Thank you so much indeed for joining us and giving us a sense of the environment in Zimbabwe ahead of the elections in 2023. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
All right, that's Blessing Vava, who's the director of the Crisis in Zimbabwe Coalition, and that's a conglomeration of more than 75 civic society organizations talking about the environment in Zimbabwe just ahead of those crucial 2023 elections.